So the next question is, how do you personally keep from being hooked by negative reactions? And let me bring this down here so I don't have to keep looking up. Maybe that helps. That kind of helps my brain. Okay, let's see here. How do you personally keep from being hooked by negative reactions? I would say personally, practice, of course, and then also studying NLP. There are masters in every category. Like some have doctor in front of their name, some have psychologists in front of their name, and some have occultists behind their name. And so really the reality here is that we're in this collective, and that's why it's most important to really stop the judgments and the blame games and all this kind of stuff, because that can actually prevent you from expanding and learning. So you can see somebody that doesn't necessarily fit the demographic that you like and turn off their message because you feel like, oh, they can't know the truth because they're X. And then that's your stigma. That's a real problem. But if you actually are starting to realize that all is self, and you do that energetically, you're then attracted to the information, even if it's in a finite way, of the answer is that you seek. That's what's been happening for me. The more vast I am about realizing that all of these are a part of my consciousness, i.e. all is self, the more that I'm able to be led to information that actually is like, wow, I think that this more has to do with what we're experiencing in the metaphysical field than even what people call metaphysics. And in this case, NLP is one of those things, actually seeing how the consciousness begins to actually form all sorts of ideas based on different conditions that it's been put in. And we've talked about this a little bit in ambassador training. Ambassador training, by the way, is always off the chain. It's always something new coming through because it's co-creative. If you want to join, I definitely recommend that you jump in if you can join. But we've been talking about hypnosis recently and just how everyone is under a stage of hypnosis or trance, whether they know it or not, because we do it to ourselves. It's being done to us, from the TV and products being sold to us. And it's also being done to us on a bigger level that is not even considered as a product. And this is when someone's trying to sell you a nation, or when someone's trying to sell you a person like a president, or when someone is trying to sell you an ideal or idea like what you mean being in a certain skin color, or all of those things are contexts that must be hypnotically suggested to those that have inherited those dispositions. So because of that, it's about realizing that anybody that's hypnotized, though, is not going to know that they're hypnotized, that's going to be the number one trait that everyone hypnotized is going to exhibit, is that they're going to deny that they're actually in some type of hypnosis. And that's why I was saying that what Alcohol Anonymous really is actually the laws of the original Illuminati. And that the A period, period, A period, period, which is the symbol of the Illuminati, is actually the symbol of Alcohol Anonymous. And when you look at the principles, you just strip away the idea that you're just getting rid of an alcohol addiction, and you just use the principles to see that this is how you remove any kind of habits or addictions or stagnant points. Then you actually will become illuminated off that kind of knowledge. And the beginning of it, and that's why it's so effective, but again, it's compartmentalized. It becomes effective because the beginning of it says what? That you first have to admit it. Because if you don't admit it, then it never really occurs to you. So the group of covert hypnosis and all the different things that you see going on in the reality where hypnosis is used, it functions on that key fundamental, and that's to boast up a person's I-ness or pride or ego to make them feel like that this couldn't happen to them, and then to proficiently do it to them and they'll never would see it. And so because of that, it's important to actually study that, study neurolinguistic programming, and actually see how you can begin to remove these impulses, things that happen so fast that you couldn't even catch it, which would then be a negative reaction. And then, of course, there's a little energy siphon. There's a reaffirmation of a stage that you've been actually stuck in, and now you're still stuck in it. And then you actually don't find yourself really cured from it. And that's why I also made a statement the other day about how many people were really actually cured, if you may, from pain, illness, sickness, and different things that they said that they wanted to get over. Did they forget about it? Or is it still deep down there somewhere and just not as prevalent as it used to be? How many times are we able to actually get rid of something completely? And I would argue that we probably never get rid of something completely. We may suppress it. And so to truly be able to get ourselves in the proper state with whatever we experienced, we have to harmonize with it. And the only way we harmonize with something is actually being able to understand where it's coming from and where it's going and where it came from. And that actually takes us to be very courageous and go within ourselves and say, this is what happened to me, and this is the direct result of that. So what was also brought up is how it's easy to manipulate a person that has experienced trauma from a specific, let's say, demographic. Let's say, for instance, I got beat up by, I don't know, Arabian or Arab kid when I was younger, okay? And it was a pretty bad fight. You know, he just totally whooped me. So let's say 15 years later, when someone else comes to me and says, hey, I don't like Arabs, it would be easier for me to say, neither do I, because of the experience that I had when I was younger with that Arab kid. You see what I mean? And so that's a light example. But if you can think of the reality, which I think of even the Western culture actually functions on racism, like most of everything that is produced, even when we were younger, especially when you watch the cartoons and you realize this, is all functioned on this division and racism and all this kind of stuff. So then later on, 10 or 15 years in the future, when something is presented by that same party and says, we don't like this, it's easy for a person to say, I don't either. But now, in having full mastery over your consciousness, you have to be able to wipe all of that stuff clean by harmonizing with it and by recognizing, hey, that's where that thinking is coming from. And it's also a strong generalization because it's never going to be an everything with anything. And then as I start unseating all of that, then it actually starts to bring a much more grander being. And I feel like that if we keep saying, well, I'm going to become activated or I'm going to become enlightened or all of that, that's more of what we're talking about. We're not talking about raising into the sky in a beam of light like a Jesus Christ going into some spaceship. We're talking about actually being such a 360 well-rounded being on the physical plane that you actually do reach contentment, which is feeling great about where you are. And then anything else that you're benefiting from your daily growth, you're doing it in joy, like meaning that it's actually something that is becoming what you feel like is strengthening you, not something that you feel like that you just have to do. Because anything that you feel like you just have to do, even if you keep doing it, it starts developing certain isms and stigmas within the consciousness that don't allow you to truly get the experience that you were looking for from it.